Type second, in direction sense test, when direction and distance both are given. So you can say that based on direction and distance. So based on direction and distance. Now in this type of question, distance is also given along with the directions, and we have to use geometrical figures to identify the final distance between the initial point and the final point, and how much distance that person covers. So to take some example, we should have some knowledge about the geometrical figure. For example, the most important figure which we used in this is a triangle. We should know that in right angle triangle, this is called base, this is called height or perpendicular, and this is called hypotenuse. So base, perpendicular and hypotenuse, and the relation between base, perpendicular and hypotenuse is hypotenuse square is equal to base square plus perpendicular square. So suppose in some question this is given that, suppose this is a right angle triangle, right angle at this angle, and its perpendicular is given 4 centimeter meter, and base is given 3 meter, and then we have to find out the hypotenuse. So the hypotenuse is become base square, which is 4 square plus 3 squares, and its under root, and that is equal to 25 under root, and which is 5, because distance is always positive. So that's why the value of hypotenuse is 5 meter. So by this method, this is called Pythagoras theorem. By this method we can easily calculate the hypotenuse. So this is the one of the most important figure in direction sensors which we use. One special case is there when in right angle triangle, when the two sides are equal. For example, if the base is equal to the perpendicular, in that case, if this is given that base and perpendicular are of x meter long, then the value of hypotenuse is root 2x. We can easily and direct calculate this thing by using that Pythagoras theorem. Mohan traveled 7 km eastward. Let's also start to draw the diagram. Mohan travels 7 km eastward, then he turns right and travels 3 km, and further turns right again and travels 11 km. How far is he from the starting point? So let's start to solve this question. Because in first line it is given that Mohan travels 7 km in eastward, it means that person start his journey in east direction, and initially he covers 7 kilometers. So Mohan covers 7 km in east direction, then he take a right turn. Right turn means in clockwise direction, and then he covers 3 kilometer. 3 kilometer, then again take a right turn. Now again take a right turn means in clockwise direction. It means the next side is parallel to the previous side of 7 kilometer, and now he covers 11 kilometer. 11 kilometer. Now please make it sure that 11 the side which the line segment you drawn of 11 kilometer should be greater than the line segment which you draw earlier of 7 kilometer, so that we can divide this in two different geometrical figure. First figure is of rectangle. So if these two opposite sides are parallel, and these two opposite sides are parallel, then it form a rectangle of dimension 7 and 3. So this perpendicular is of 3, and if we join these two, we are having one more geometrical figure, which is known as right angle triangle. And now because we have to find out how far he is from the starting point, and we know that this is the starting point, let O is the starting point and P is the final point. Now the distance between O and P is totally based on the dimension of this triangle. For example, the perpendicular is of length 3 kilometer, and let this point is Q, then the distance between P and Q is something 11 minus 7. 11 minus 7 is 4. So perpendicular is 3, base is 4, so the hypotenuse of this triangle is 5. So the distance of final point from the initial point is 5 kilometer. So OP is equal to 5 kilometer. This is the answer of the first question. Take one more example. Rajan went 25 km north, then he turned west and covered 20 km, then he turned south and covered 15 kilometers, then finally turning to east and covered 20 km. In which direction was he from his house? Now this question is because in final question only this is asked that in which direction he is, but make it sure that this time not we we have to calculate the direction of that person from its initial position, not the final direction of that person. So there is a difference between these two things: direction, final direction of that person, and the direction of that person from its initial position. So both the questions are different, and suppose you have to find out the final direction of that person from its initial position, so you should have some distance along with the turns. For example, in this question this is given that Rajan start Rajan went 25 km in north. We draw the diagram. First he covers 25 kilometers in north. So that 25 kilometers in north, take a right turn. Then he turned to west and covered 20 kilometer. So he turns toward west and covered 20 kilometer again. Then he turned south and covered 15 kilometer. 15 kilometer should be lesser than 25, so that this is 15 kilometer. And then he turning to east and covered 20 kilometer again. So again 20 kilometer, it's mean he is on the initial straight line or initial line segment, because the two parallel side is of same length. So we can say that this figure is a rectangle where because these two sides are opposite and equal, so these two sides are also opposite and equal. So because this is 15 kilometers, so we can say that this length is also of 15 kilometer. So the remaining distance is of 10 kilometer. But the question is in which direction he is from its initial position. We can say that from its initial position he is in north direction. So this is type second, based on direction and distance, and the last type based on angle. Type third, based on angle. In this third type, the initial position of that person is given, that in which direction he is facing, and then this is given that in which direction and by which angle he is moving. For example, a person facing east direction first take a turn in anti-clockwise direction with an angle of 45 degree. It's mean that now that person is facing toward northeast direction. So we should remember the directions on paper, and then we have to try to solve the given question. Let's start with questions direct. The first question is: a man facing northwest, he turns 90 degree in clockwise direction and then 135 degree in anti-clockwise direction. Which direction he is facing now? According to the question, first that person facing toward northwest direction. We know that on paper these are the axes, then northwest direction is this, and this is given that initially that person facing toward northwest direction. He turns 90 degree in clockwise direction. 90 degree in clockwise direction means now he is facing toward northeast direction. Then 135 degree in anti-clockwise direction. Now in 135 degree in anti-clockwise, so this is 90 degree and this is 135 degree. So then he take a turn in anti-clockwise direction with an angle of 135 degree. So this angle is of 135 degree angle, and the new direction is west direction. And the question is in which direction he is now, or which direction he is facing finally. So the answer, he is facing west direction. The answer is west. Take another question based on angle, but this is not only based on angle, this is based on angle as well as distance. Example, while facing east you turn to your left and walk 10 meter, then turn to your left and walk 10 meter again, and now you turn 45 degree towards your right and go straight to cover 25 meters. Now in which direction are you from your starting point? To solve this question, we should draw the diagram. For example, first, while facing east, a person facing east, you turn to your left and walk 10 meter. From this point you have to turn to your left and walk 10 meter. So 10 meter, suppose this is 10 meter, and now you turn to your left again and walk 10 meter. Again turn to your left and walk 10 meter. Make sure that this initial distance is nothing. That person is facing toward east only, so this initial distance is nothing. And then he turned 45 degree, then you turn 45 degree towards your right. Now make sure that 45 degree towards your right. It doesn't mean that you have to draw this diagram like this. Suppose you think that this is 45 degree towards your right, then this is wrong, because this is not 45 degree towards your right. Or if you suppose that this is 45 degree towards your right, then in both the conditions the answers are wrong. So what is 45 degree towards your right? Just extend this line and then take an angle of 45 degree towards your right. We know that right means clockwise direction, and if we found this 45 degree angle with in clockwise direction with the extended line, then only we can get the right direction. So this direction is, or this rotation is 45 degree clockwise rotation. So finally he rotated himself in with an angle of 45 degree in clockwise direction, and he is facing northwest direction right now. So the question is, now in which direction are you from your starting point? Now we know that because our starting point is this, and from here in which direction that person is, he is in northwest direction. So the answer is northwest direction. So these are the questions based on direction sense.